catechism. And he's like, oh, I really need to write this down. So the answer is, they're not here yet, but we're going to make sure that they get ordered today before we leave the church. I've had an interesting time through the night, last night. It's when the Lord speaks to me the most. He wakes me up in the middle of the night. And I say, what's up? And the conversation that was taking place was the fact that what we need to do now is to apply what we have been made aware of in these first 6 weeks of the large catechism, and you shall have no other gods before me. So the best way that can take place is by seeing it from our own historical perspective, because as many as sit at table, our historical perspective in life is completely different. My life lived is different than the pastor's, is different than Claire's, is different than Andrew's or Paul or Mary Ann or Meg. We're different, but the same truth applies to each and every one of us from the biblical narrative, even though our historical experiences are substantially different. The same eternal and spiritual truth can always be seen from different vantage points. So with that, we basically looked at 5 different pieces that Martin Luther was sharing with us to help us understand what it means to have a God. And the first one that he shared with us is, some people say that money, that you need money and possessions. So think of your favorite parable, whatever that is. When you look at that parable, what Jesus is telling us, teaching us, coaching us, encouraging us, is that look at the world in which you live, your historical perspective, and then see the eternal spiritual truth that lies within there. So one of the ways that I look at this first part about where people have money or possessions as their God, because they believe they can trust in it. You have to forgive me because I talk about experiences that I have gone through. You've all heard. I've not gotten to hear yours, but you all have heard mine. So in 2004, I went through this experience. And after that experience, several people would come up to me and say things like, I really do believe they have a cure for cancer, but they're making too much money from it. And I would look at those people and say, are you kidding me? You know who Sam Walton is? The owner of Walmart and Sam's Club? He died with $54 billion in the bank. He died from cancer. If anybody could have afforded to pay for the cure, Sam Walton would have been a good candidate. Or how about someone like Jackie Onassis Kennedy? Do you think she had enough money and possessions to be able to rescue her from that same monster? So this is how I understand this first piece, that there is no cure besides trusting in God to deliver you from it. You can throw all the money in the world at it, right, Mary Ann? Do they collect money from the insurance company? Yes, but to believe that God is allowing people to suffer under this horrendous affliction, or any affliction, can be somehow offset by finances. This is how I process this piece from my historical perspective. The only way that I sit here with you today is by the grace of God. People continually carried Marianne and myself and other people who have gone through this affliction to prayer. And God had mercy because we trusted in Him. Money had nothing to do with it. What say you? Can you see something in your own personal life or in the world in which you live where what Martin is encouraging us to take a look at, trusting in God and not in resource? He is your resource. He is the answer. No?
I can say that I'm sitting here by the grace of God because of my own stupidity. I mean, as far as, my God being money or whatever, people that know me, that ain't it. But my own stupidity, I've done so many stupid things in this world, I shouldn't be sitting here.
But these will get picked up on other pieces that Martin has brought to our attention. And I agree, and we're going there.
But as far as, I can't think of anything that I put all my trust in that.
Besides God.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I trust this and I trust the, but nothing that
stands out.
No, like I said, money, if you know me, money isn't it.
Nope.
I think in the past I've relied on prayer for jobs. It was always, boy, I really want that other job, there's more money there, I really want that, and it didn't come through. I'm like, man, what did I do wrong? And as you go on the process, you're going, I'm going to have to give this one up because we're going to have to send up a few prayers because I really want this one. This one's really a good job. This one is better. And that wasn't it. It was the tour you had to take through all this to get to where you needed to be. And certainly, I am not making anywhere. The money I make that has nothing to do with it. I'm happy with what I'm doing, and that had more to do with it.
Right.
So it was kind of it went on for a couple of years, and it was quite the path I took.
I'm giggling because there is a similarity in our experiences, Just a quick way of understanding that. We don't have a clock here, so this is why I keep pushing that number so that I don't get in trouble. So Katie and I were married at the age of 21. 3 months after we were married, I was in a pretty bad motorcycle crash. And we had to go on. She was a senior in college. I was a non-union bricklayer. We had to live on welfare. $219 a month. We ate hot dogs every single day because of that incident. And when I got that cast off, I looked at my wife and I said, "You'll never be embarrassed like that again." Never. And I just went on a pathway. I was determined that I was going to be independently wealthy. And I began to work like a maniac, 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. I can remember her saying, "Well, when can we have kids? When we can afford them. We need to pile up some. We can't go through what we went through." And it sent me on a pathway that was wrong. I read books, I bought real estate, I did all of these different types of things in order to get financial independence. And then one day, the Holy Spirit caused the veil to be lifted from my eyes and the scales to fall from them. And I realized, you don't own anything. God owns it. You're only managing it. And I departed from that mission to become independently wealthy. And I can tell you from that, when I left independent wealth pursuit and surrendered to God, oh my goodness, has He blessed us. Far beyond anything I ever imagined. And the biggest thing, like Andrew said, is everything else was always up in the middle of the night, wondering about how to do this and how to do that. To, I don't have to worry about it anymore. What do you want me to do, Lord? To the point where when I began to study Holy Scripture, I was a self-employed person. And I still am that self-employed person, per se. Used to work long days, having to sell work. And then I had a pastor who was very persistent. And he got me to study the Bible, the Bethel Bible series. And God used that to turn me upside down. But I started to bellyache and complain. Lord, how? How do you expect me to run a business, be out bidding jobs till 9 o'clock every night, and then come home and then study because our classes were 3-hour classes with testing every single week? Hundreds of Bible concepts are memorized from this. And the Spirit spoke. And to this day, I get the strangest look from people because I've been in business for 45 years. And it's now almost 40 years ago that I took the names off the truck and unlisted the phone numbers. Because that's what the Spirit told me to do. Trust me, I will make sure you have work for your company. You need to study my word. Well, motivational piece, when you're a bricklayer, you get paid for laying bricks. So what I did to help memorization and work on those Bible concepts so that I could be prepared for that class on Thursday nights for 3 hours is I used to print the Bible concepts out. I used to put one here, one here. There was a corner pole, there was a corner pole, if you know anything about masonry. I would not allow myself to put the line up till I did a concept. When you're self-employed, you learn them concepts quick. Get that line up, start laying bricks. But ever since that point, one time did I have to say this prayer. Lord, what am I supposed to manage? Nothing, because there was no work. And here we are, decades later, and we're scheduled for the next 2 years. All because I stopped trying to be in charge and asked God to be in charge. So the next piece that Martin brings to our attention is when we put undue emphasis upon knowledge and intellect, wisdom, family, those things. So let me ask you a question. If those things are of any value, knowledge and all of these other things that Martin points out, did you ever hear Jesus say, "Go, for your knowledge has made you well"? If you did, you need to point it out because I never read it. Go, for your family has made you well. Go because of whatever you experience in your life and you use and put as very important has made you well. No, what does Jesus say? Go for your faith. That's what we're sitting here about. We're taking a closer look at this faith that saves, living the Christian life. Understanding that you can know a whole bunch of things, but what's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Answer: wisdom is knowing how it applies. You can know hundreds of biblical concepts. You can have the Bible memorized from front to back. It doesn't save. It doesn't save. Trusting in God. That's what saves. So we did the first two so far.
Okay.
So jump in.
All Right. Well, I wanted
I
to...
told them we forgot to order the books.
Oh, okay.
Forget to
Yeah,
order
mea
today.
culpa to all of you. Our apologies. Well, I wanted to quick revisit something before we move on. We started to talk about 2 weeks ago about the fear of God language and our anxiety about that, particularly as modern people. So why would Luther over and over again specify fear, love, and trust God? We are just so that's how he begins every petition. If you've read ahead, if you look ahead, it's always we should fear, love, and trust God so that we blank. That's the small catechism language. So why would you think that? Why would that be something he wants to talk about all the time? If it's, I mean, it couldn't have been any more fun to fear God in the 1500s than it is today. Go ahead, Connie.
So, this is just my perception of it. Okay, he's the one we have to obey. He's the one that I personally go to for answers with everything, you know. And he put all of us on earth as people, you know, to love, serve, and share. So we have to honor him. He died for us. He gave up everything for us. So that's my perception of where that comes in.
Okay. Other people, other ideas, it's how you think about it, huh?
I see it as a reminder of what went on, and it's always to say, you can go back to some of the things we're reading now. I'll take your town away. I'll send you out. You'll be in Babylon for a while. If you trust me, I'll bring you back. So it's always harkening back to the same concept over and over. It sounds like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I think fear, love, and trust are the qualities that we place upon any God in our life, whether it's Mammon or God himself. We fear the loss of money. We trust that money will provide comfort and health, and we love money as a species. And God is telling us that is not where we're supposed to put our fear, love, and trust. Fear, love, and trust are qualities or things we do for, towards Him. So I think those three characteristics are reserved specifically for God Himself.
Okay.
That's why Luther reminds us.
Okay. Others? Any ideas? Yeah. Megan.
But not exactly, our fear of God, our awe and respect, but our fear of losing God.
Right. We just got back, we were Friday night up at college visiting my kids, and my son's roommate was playing Tevye. He had the lead role in Fiddler on the Roof. And as a whole, of course, everyone knows the song "If I Were a Rich Man" and all that kind of stuff, right? And someone says, "May you be, you don't want to be cursed with wealth." He says, "Oh, may such a curse fall upon me, and may I never recover." You know. Yeah, we tend to fear. You mentioned mammon, right? We fear a lack of money when we should be fearing a lack of God's grace, a lack of God's goodness, right? One of the things that God kind of convicted me about as I was reflecting on that conversation we had in here, and it was a wonderful conversation, was that by specifying fear, love, and trust, we human beings are motivated by two things, carrots and sticks. And God wants to be our only motivation. He's both carrot and stick. And there's a wonderful prayer in the daily prayers of the church. I encourage you, if you're just before worship sometime, pull a green book out in front of you and look at morning prayer and evening prayer. There's some beautiful things in there that most of us hear most of the time because we're not here midweek. But one of those prayers is you want us to fear nothing but losing you, right? And when Jesus says to his disciples, "Do not fear the one who can hurt the body or kill the body, but rather fear him who can cast both body and soul into hell," right? That's not the devil. The devil does not get to do that. He doesn't have that power. He'd like to drag us if he could. He'd like us to cooperate with him in moving out of God's orbit. But only God is the judge. That's what we say in the Creed every week. So we don't. It's not a fear of that should produce anxiety, but it is a fear that should motivate. It should keep. We should be anxious about, as you said, losing our sense of God, trust in God, losing our relationship with God. That does not mean not having doubts. Doubts are a perfect thing to bring to God and wrestle through with Him. Yeah, go ahead, Colleen. You were going to say something.
It's so funny. You just said the magic word, doubts. You know, Tom and I, when we do anything, we do it regardless, most things, depending on what we're working on, a project or so. We do it in mind with benefiting others, okay? And I think I, so more than him, wrestle with certain things because back home in Trinidad, we have a saying, when you're trying to do something good, the devil steps in and put a spoke in your wheel, you know? And that is what I wrestle with. And I'm like, God, I know you're in control of this. Tom and I are trying to accomplish this, or we're trying to accomplish that. Could you get him out the way? And, you know, so.
Yeah,
It's,
definitely.
and there's no doubt, but he steps in and put in that doubt. And to what Deacon Mike was saying earlier, I awake in the middle of the night too, because here's the Spirit talking to me, and I'm wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. When I look at the clock, it's only like 2 o'clock or 2:30 in the morning. What are you doing? So my response to that usually is to pray, for me to go back to sleep. You know? So that's how I handle it. But yeah.
Definitely. And in my experience as a pastor, and I've only been a pastor 20 years, so there's plenty of people with more experience than me, is that doubt becomes the opportunity for deeper faith. It's faith being born, as long as you're talking to God through it. It's God. Why? Perfectly okay to ask God why He's doing that. Oh, He may not give you an answer, at least not right away. But it's an open question. It's not a turning away from God, and that's something that our English translations don't capture well. Because oftentimes you'll see sometimes translations where Jesus will say something like for instance, when they're when He settles the storm, and He'll say, "Don't doubt, but have faith," or whatever. Well, that's not what it says in the Greek. You can just put the letter A at the beginning of any word, and it means the opposite in Greek. So He literally says, "Don't be in unfaith." He means don't turn away from trusting. Doubt isn't. Why is this happening? You're talking to God. Of course, like I said, just saw Fiddler on the Roof, and of course if you've ever seen the play, Tevye's talking to God the whole way through. And we were kind of laughing about it. So one of my favorite lines from the play says, "God, I know we are your chosen people. Sometimes, could you choose someone else?" But he continues to talk to God through the whole thing, even through his daughter leaving the faith to become a Christian. He continues to talk to God. And the play ends with them talking to God. As they walk off stage, they've been run off their land by the Russian Tsar, and it's been a pogrom. And so it's when we're in unfaith, when we say, "I'm done with this God thing." That's different than I have doubts, I have questions, my theology's changing, I don't understand. And that's, my theology's changed a lot of times in my life. And it's always a little, depending on how close to the center of what you believe the thing is that's changing, the more anxiety producing it is for me. What I keep remembering is that theology is my understanding of God, not His understanding of me. And so I'll just keep talking to God through that, like, don't know where this is going to land, God, help me out, So I wanted to bring that back around because I don't want us to be worried about being fearful of God. The fear that's there is the very power that God uses to rescue. If you're not afraid of someone who's more powerful than you, particularly the one who's going to judge you, you're not paying attention. But it shouldn't produce anxiety because we know that God's will is to save and to love. And it looked like you were going to say something.
No, you were referencing Fiddler on the Roof, but it also seems like Job would be a good reference to hear.
Job would be a great reference.
He continuously talked to God while his friends were talking for God.
Yes, exactly.
You know?
They're talking about God, and
Yeah.
he's busy talking to God. Yeah.
So that's why we often read the book of Job. Like, how did it? But he really had a faith in God.
Yep. And when he finally presents his case, God talks back to him.
Oh, yeah.
And then it becomes one of those, and my favorite line in the book of Job is, now the words of Job are ended. It's kind of a existential way of repeating Psalm 46:10, right? Be still and know that I'm God. That's where we're at. So, Michael,
Yes, sir.
you were quiet through all that. I want to just
Yeah, I'm listening.
I'm kicking back to you.
So, a good thing for us to do with each commandment as we go through them is to make sure we see them relative to our life, not as something distant, but something that is a part of our everyday life, And we took a look at the first two pieces. The third piece that Martin Luther places in front of us for consideration is, you would find this in Colossians chapter 2, where it says, self-abasement and the worship of angels. It's discouraged. So Colossians is a book that is written against false teaching. So Paul is writing to the church at Colossae saying, do not persist in self-abasement. You know what that means? Punishing yourself, disciplining yourself. I can't do. God doesn't want us to feel that way. He wants us to be open in that relationship with him and to receive his instruction. But the second part is, and the worship of angels. So what Martin brought to our attention is when you're worshiping all of these people that are considered saints, Apollonia, Lawrence, Roque, are some of the ones that he used. Now, what we talked about last week, just briefly introducing the fact that the remembrance of that at a specific moment in time, the very creator of the world took on human flesh and manifested himself in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. The incredible wonder of that visitation among us is recorded in the first 3 verses of the Gospel of John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and through him all things were made. And it tells us how Jesus took on human flesh. So, my thought, in this little simple mind of mine, is why would you go to someone else when Jesus experienced everything you could possibly experience? We go to him. We trust in him. We don't go to a saint, like I shared with you in the past, of a little white ivory looking figurine, St. Christopher, that is the driving saint. Make sure it's in your... Jesus experienced everything and more than you will ever experience. So when you hear words like this in Hebrews in the 2nd and the 4th chapter, therefore he had to be made like his brothers in every way, so that he would become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, because he suffered when he was tempted. He's able to help you when you're being tempted. So there's no reason to pray to a saint or to hold anyone in that posture of high esteem, except the language that I find comfortable to speak, on calling upon the most precious name that has ever been spoken in heaven and on earth, the name of Jesus Christ.
And again, I mentioned this in passing. For those of you who have Catholic or Orthodox friends and family, the way that the conversation has progressed, and I think it's even been a clarification of Catholic theology. Luther talks about not worshiping saints. Well, the language that Catholics and Orthodox would use in this regard is venerate. and they would distinguish it from worshiping. Worshiping is what you don't do as saints. Veneration is what you do. Veneration being a language attached to ancestors. We revere the memory of my grandfather because he was such a great man, kind of thing. That's different than praying to them in the sense of worship. You shouldn't, and I think that's going to continue to be, even though I can look over the Catholic fence, my brothers and sisters say, yeah, it's not idolatry what they're doing. I'm going to also sit where I'm sitting and say, I don't need to go through a saint to get to Jesus. Now, what I don't practice this theoretically because it's not my Christian experience, but I could go to a saint and say, hey, would you pray for me? Just like I can ask my brother here to pray for me. Because I have it on pretty good authority, they're more alive than we are. Jesus said as much. I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not the God of the dead, but of the living. So they're built more alive than we are. But it's not part of my Christian experience to do that. I just talk to Jesus. I just talk to God, the Father, through Jesus. So
We were called into account, Pastor and I. Why are you praying for saints at the altar? And we had to explain to them, you got the language right. We're praying for them, not to them. There's a difference. We're thanking God for their presence in the life, the great cloud of witnesses that came before us. We're recognizing that, as Martin Luther says in the 5th part of the first commandment, that we have to understand that God works in and through people. And so we had to set the record straight, but we were brought up on that charge. What are you doing?
yeah.
No, we're not doing what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And we specifically use that language. We thank you for Moses. We thank you for, as we name the different saints that have come before us and are the great cloud of witnesses.
Because they're great role models, though. And you don't remember your role models unless you call them to mind, really. You're literally recalling them to mind. I use the example when I teach the Lord's Prayer to the confirmation students, and I think I've used it in a sermon here. You can go to galleries around the world, these art galleries, right, and see great art students, and they are trying to stroke for stroke reduplicate the work of a master hanging in front of them. Why are those not forgeries? Well, because they're not allowed to make them the same size. They're literally not. It has to be a completely different size canvas. That's how you keep fraudulent art off of the net, off of the world market. But they're trying to imitate the master, not so that they can forever do Degas pictures, but because they want to learn something about brushstroke technique or something to then do their own pictures. The same way I want to learn from the lives of the Christians who've come before me, not so I can redo their life, but so I can learn from their example and apply it to my own life in my own context. And so at the evening prayers, if we did the straight Green Book, and we don't here, we do kind of a version where we sing different things and stuff, but there's this beautiful prayer, because we're not a real singing congregation, so we just, at Wednesday night, we Lord in your mercy, hear our prayer, just like Sunday mornings. But the sung version of that is really cool, where like literally it's about 7 minutes of music, and the congregation sings responses, and the pastor sings the prayers, and it's beautiful, and I've gotten to do it at pastors' retreats. Well, everyone, it's Lord in your mercy, hear our prayer. Lord in your mercy, hear our prayer, except for the last one, because the last petition is thanking God for all those who have come before us, the saints. And the word saint means holy one, which is why we can call each other saints, not because we're inherently holy, but because Christ is holy and he's claimed us, right? The last one, when you thank God for those who have come before us and are now at rest, instead of saying, Lord in your mercy, hear our prayer, we sing, thanks be to God. It's the only response that changes. And that kind of expresses the Lutheran approach to these things. We thank God for their example, but we're not asking for their help to talk to Jesus, because we can do that. We don't need help for that. Okay.
They get quiet.
That's it. That's third.
Yeah, but we're almost there already. We only got 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Sorry about
They
that.
took the clock from us.
No. They ignore it anyway. We're not going to take it out of the room. So we're gonna pick up, it looks like, next week, thinking about, idolatry in a little bit different way. We're gonna talk about the idolatry of trusting in our own works. I think that's where we are.
When Brother Martin brings it to our attention about how there are Greek and Roman mythological gods, and to see how easy it is to stumble. I can remember in my younger days, I would earnestly look for a horoscope. That's pagan worship. They wrote a song about it. I don't know if these are the right words. You have to correct me if I'm wrong. When the moon is in the 7th house now and Jupiter aligns with Mars.
Oh yeah, that was from my
It
hair,
is the
right?
dawning of the age of
Yeah.
Aquarius.
Yeah.
That's paganism. And when we think that the planets lined up in some way benefit us and have our interest, what's it going to be like today? And that was one of the things that the Lord had shown me early in Bible study. Don't look at that again. Okay. It has nothing to do.
And to tie it back to what we were just talking about, the reason why, or where we started, not what we were just talking about, where we started, or at least when I walked in, you guys got started without me, is it's the trust piece. The reason why augury is forbidden, and that was the most common form of things in the ancient world, most common form of local worship. The reason augury was forbidden to Jews is because they weren't trusting God for the future. The reason you wanted to know the future is so you could position yourself for it. It's like insider trading. I know what's going to happen next, so I know what to do beforehand. Nope, I'm going to trust God, obey the commandments because that's what he told me to do. This is the reason Jews were forbidden that. And they were the only people in the ancient world who didn't practice it because it was absolutely forbidden. They were to trust God to lead and guide them, not to use the horoscopes and stuff like that.
Yeah. But you still hear people talk about it today. What are you? Christian? No, what's your sign? Christian?
I said, yeah, the cross marked on my brow at baptism. Cool.